listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Mathieson, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, everybody. This is Ashton Kirsch, your host for today's episode of the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to really talk about a fascinating topic with a fascinating person. We have Donnie Vaughn here. Donnie just published a really cool book. We're going to talk about his book, and it's about the AI advantage, and talk quite a bit about just AI technology, where we're at with technology, how it impacts claims and subrogation claims specifically, and all of that fun stuff. Donnie, thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Ashton. I appreciate it.
Well,
Happy to be here.
Let's jump right into it, man. Let's talk about your book. Tell us the title of your book, what your book's about, and what caused you to become a published author.
Right. Yeah. So the title is The AI Advantage in Claims. And it really stems from my background. I grew up around technology. When I was young, before we had computers in every household, I had a Commodore 64 and a VIC-20. I was programming basic, building out programs, and really just always been into technology. And after I graduated college at USF here in Tampa, I started working in insurance claims. So I've been doing that for 15 years. And now the AI revolution has started. I got interested in that and really started, playing around with it and just seeing the capabilities. And I was just fascinated by it just because of that tech background. And so the more I started messing around and testing the limitations and the possibilities that AI has, I started really looking at what it can do for insurance claims. And that's really what the book is about, is just a lot of what you can apply AI to your current claims workflows. And just it really gives good definitions of kind of what it is, and then opportunities or how you can use it in the claims world. And it's kind of a beginner's guide, something that I wish that I had when I first got into AI. So it's a lot of my knowledge and experience, all the training and courses that I've completed into this book as kind of like a self-help guide for those who don't really understand AI or they have limited knowledge of it, and they really want to kind of dive into it and get a little more background into it.
So let's go super 101 before we get into the nitty gritty. I'm going to imagine most people in my audience aren't living in a cave and they have internet access and they know what AI is. But why don't you, just for the sake of clarification, tell us, when you refer to AI, what are you talking about, and what technologies are kind of like the leading technologies that you are kind of discussing in your book? Are we talking about second look technologies? Are we talking about utilizing AI to redraft emails, to be, more professional in communications? Where does this apply, and what is AI in claims?
Okay, so basically there's a lot of knowledge there, or a lot of background information that goes into a simple search or a simple prompt, as they call it. And specifically when in the book, I don't just reference ChatGPT. That's one of the major ones that people are familiar with. It references quite a few other options as far as, Gemini, which is the Google version. They also have DeepSeek. Sora is a new one for ChatGPT, where it actually does videos. There's different generators for different types of writing or different types of prompts and answers that you're looking for, different responses. And there's several options of current ones that are out there on the market in the book itself, just to kind of give you a rough idea of what each one is and what they do. But keep in mind also is, like, when this book was written, this was, fairly recent, but AI is moving so fast. There's already been so many changes since the book was written. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah. So, when it comes to actually implementing these technologies, what are like the primary tools that we're talking about? Obviously, as simple as, just using, I'll be honest with you. Obviously, as an attorney, we use our, high-end, expensive legal search engines, which frankly are now embracing AI. And now, be it Westlaw, LexisNexis, Clio, VLEX, they all have now AI components to make, previously we had to use Boolean search terms, and you had to be kind of like a, an expert in just how to search. And it was fascinating and it got really good. And the better you were at using search terms, the better results you could get, the quicker you could research. Now it's almost gotten to the point where searching a legal question is getting to, instead of Boolean search, slash same sentence, slash same paragraph, we're now searching just, standard English language questions, which is amazing. But now you notice that, the average adjuster can do some really high-end legal research on ChatGPT, which, it's kind of scary for the legal industry, but also it does make it so that when we're negotiating claims, they're better versed, right? When we're talking to clients, they understand the law because I don't need to spend 2 hours explaining a complex legal issue. They can do some research on their own. What other tools are you seeing that you think are really important for insurance adjusters on this podcast, listening to us today, to start considering for utilizing in their day-to-day?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing with AI is it really creates efficiency in a lot of mundane, these minor tasks that normally complicate things or you normally spend a lot of time on. Once you get proficient with actually learning how to write the prompts and getting your desired results, you start working much faster, much more efficient, so you can focus on more important things. You can type out a subrogation demand, a subrogation letter, or even a response for arbitration forums. Something that's going to be a little more detailed than what you would just sit there and type out yourself, and it's going to be a lot faster. And I've seen results from that as well. Just not spending the time on writing a demand. Depending on how big that demand is, you could be spending, a few hours, okay? In some cases, making sure you have all the documents, making sure everything's typed out, everything's good, and then you send it. You can cut down that time in half if you use AI. Have it review the documents. As long as it's an internal, built out program, your IT has it secured, nothing shared, and they have options to do that. You can have it review those documents, make sure you have everything. It can flag any issues that you have, anything, so you can really maximize that demand when you send it out. And so that there's no coming back, no back and forth, because, you want to get paid. And that's the point of sending out the demand. You don't want those delays. If your demand isn't proper, there's going to be back and forth. You're wasting time on getting that money back, for the insurer. So using that AI, knowing how to write those prompts and using it efficiently, you're going to work much faster and much more accurate.
Absolutely. And I will say that, there's something to be said about with demand letters, as you mentioned. I talk about the bomb throwing demand letter. When I do I do weekly trainings for a lot of my clients. And we do trainings on what they can do to be more effective. And one of those things is, it's the idea of the first impression principle in psychology. And the idea is that your first impression means something, both consciously and subconsciously, to your adversary or whoever you're meeting with or working with or negotiating with. And bomb throwing demands that include more than just a template, you owe us, pay now, or we file suit. It means a lot in the recoveries. We've done the math, right? We've run the data and we can show how much more money a carrier brings in when they include photos, when they include, be it case law, being careful that you're not practicing law without a license, of course, but including requisite facts, supports, and so forth. And AI can help us to do that. One risk that we have that has to be noted, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of people don't get, is ChatGPT is, in most of these search engines, are public sourced. So meaning that what you put into there is not, proprietary. So we cannot, and I will just reiterate this and stress this, you cannot just take your claim file and put it into ChatGPT. You cannot just take the facts of your case or medical records and put them into Gemini. I can promise you my attorneys are not doing that, but I can tell you that I've been with opposing counsel on other cases where they have told me that they are just inputting claim files, inputting data into ChatGPT. And guess what? What could happen later is I could do a search and that data could come up and we cannot do so. So always make sure. There are a lot of vendors that create proprietary systems like us, our claims management system. We have proprietary AI. We have our own algorithms. I've built and I'm building out an algorithm that I can input subrogation data, a claim file, and in our own system, it will give me a full analysis of the case. It will give me a likely recovery value. So that when clients come to me and they ask, obviously it's still, relatively, obscure numbers and very ambiguous, But the fascinating thing is that this is an option. It can take a claim file and it can give me a synopsis of it shortly. We can input 20,000 pages of medical records, and within 5 minutes, we have a full outline of the medical status of this patient, the treatment status. I mean, it's really fascinating. I had one recently where it was a 14 vehicle collision. I just needed something rather than going through that very crazy police report. I put the police report in and said, let me know what happened. And it gave me a paragraph outlining the facts, what happened, who's likely at fault. Now, who knows if that's true? We can't rely on it, but it surely helps me more than digging through this fact and having to build, like I've done for years, a full outline of here's vehicle one, vehicle two. So the way to utilize it, I mean, there's so many ways, but it is fascinating. And the technology it's being built on top of, being built on top of other things. We have apps now built on ChatGPT and other apps built on those apps. We have the crazy thing for those who are not really tech nerds, like I think you and I kind of are here, is that, I mean, it's generative learning, right? So the machine, I mean, the algorithms, the AI, whatever the scientific explanation would be, they're learning from the inputs. So every day it's getting smarter and smarter, which is wild. It's so cool.
It is. Yeah.
No, do you buy into the fear of AI and where things could go? Not to get too sci-fi or conspiracy theory, but you're even Elon Musk started OpenAI or with some partners, and he's out there saying that we're pretty close to the point of no return, where the machines could one day be taking over the world. Not a believer in that personally, but what risks do you see of AI and the technology in general?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. Before I really got into testing AI out, I heard all those, news stories, from the media, everything online about AI and, referencing the Terminator, Skynet taking over, so once you really dig in and understand and learn about what it truly is, the capabilities, there are certain limitations on it. I don't foresee it taking over the world, anything like that. To me, that's sort of just a myth. I think there are, guardrails that are set in place to kind of keep it from going out of control. Now, if it can learn on its own and start going past that, that'll be interesting to see. But that day hasn't come yet. So I think we got a long way to go before anything crazy like that happens. It'll be interesting to see. I know OpenAI created a job for something similar to that. I think he was offering $500,000 salary for a role to really kind of be that guy to stop it when things start going crazy. So that's puts you a little on edge to think that, okay, that's a possibility that they would create a role for that. So, I mean, we'll see. Only time will tell, right?
No, obviously there's the sci-fi side, but then there's like the true real risks happening today. And one of those real risks that I hear a lot of people in the industry talking about is, what happens to their roles? What happens to the entry-level adjuster who previously, an adjuster could handle 150 cases? What happens when AI takes over that? Will we see a lot of people, no longer having those positions? Will we see, I think it's more so in every other field. Like we have a lot of other fields where, be it tech-related fields, different fields where positions are no longer relevant, they become redundant. Is that happening? We've already seen jobs reports and we think it's already occurring. And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I just don't know the answer, right? And without it getting political, I don't know if anyone can say the answer. I mean, I heard somebody did ask Musk that question, and they said, do you feel like you're destroying jobs and you're rooting the economy? And the response was, I don't remember exactly, but it was a quote something along the lines of, imagine how many jobs we could create if we built roads with shovels and pickaxes. Do we want to go back to doing that? Is that job creation, or is that just inefficiency? So, I mean, it's a unique place we're in right now because, but for growth, we're going to see redundancy. We're going to have to see reductions. How do you think that impacts the industry, and where do you think we go from here?
Yeah, I think when it comes to AI and claims, like I said before, it's going to create a lot of efficiency, which is the basic tasks that adjusters are handling, day to day. It's going to make things a lot faster. So there may be a chance, where they might reduce that staffing because those adjusters are being so much more efficient than having, let's say one or two adjusters is being way more efficient because of AI than having a whole team of 9 or 10. So that's definitely a possibility, but you also have to look at the back end of it too, right? So you still have to have that human touch. You have to have someone reviewing those responses and confirming the accuracy. I don't know how many times I've entered in numbers to ChatGPT, and the results I get, it changed it. It went off of prior conversations that I've had with it and produced an entirely wrong result. And so you have to have that human touch just to verify the accuracy of the data that you're getting and not posting that somewhere where it could, hurt your business. So I think that's going to create jobs where there's going to be have to be like a role for audits, increasing that. So moving those adjusters, if you're diminishing that workforce for adjusters, moving them or, creating those roles for people who audit the results of that to verify the data. So maybe some more like data entry positions available, data audits, stuff like that.
And I will say that, so I've thought about it in the subrogation context solely. I know you have background in just claims in general, right? But my focus is subro. And I've thought about it, and just yesterday I gave a webinar to a client, and it was on efficient claims practices, right? How to be better at identifying subrogation. And we talked to AI. One thing we also talked about was just the sheer extent of claims that go misidentified, unidentified. Subrogation is there, but it wasn't red flagged. When you think about the numbers, it's somewhere between about 1/3 of all viable subrogation claims just aren't identified, aren't pursued. By implementing AI technology, the way I see it, we could increase the amount of claims that are viable and pursued by 1/3, meaning that increase, workflow by 1/3, thereby, accounting for a lot of the loss in efficiency with AI technology. So, I think there's a place where from today to the future, as we increase efficiencies, we'll increase workflow, claim flow, thereby, I don't think really showing that much of an impact. Now, I think there is a place where those adjusters, those attorneys who don't embrace the technology, I think they will be left behind, as they
100%.
should be. There's a point where, if you're still sitting there working with a typewriter, you're not going to be able to compete with the adjuster who uses email, right? Yeah. I think it's almost to that point where it's not a choice anymore. It's still kind of a choice today, but in the next 3 years, I'd say there's going to be no choice. You either embrace it or you go find something new to do. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And you'll see a lot of these bigger insurance carriers, they're creating these roles. They're hiring and building out these AI, positions and roles within their companies to get on board. And then you see the ones who aren't doing that. And that's what scares me, is those ones who are scared of AI for whatever reason, they're not getting on board with that. They're not going to have those efficiency in the claims. They're not going to be able to handle the workload. So they are going to get left behind unless they do something radical, to stay on board with the other carriers. They're just not going to be competitive at all.
And I will say, as obviously we're coming from kind of like an insurance company and a law firm perspective, but I'm going to relate this to TPAs, subrogation vendors quickly. There's a point where they don't embrace. And I have a lot of clients who are subro vendors and TPAs. Some of them are, some of them aren't, right? Some carriers, some subro vendors, and some attorneys are still of the mindset is this is ridiculous. This is just a fad like Beanie Babies. It's not going to go anywhere. And I'm like, man, no. Play around with it, no. And I have a partner, one of our shareholders here, who was of that mindset for a while, about 1.5 years ago, until he really started playing around with AI. And now he is the biggest believer and proponent of this technology ever. So you have to play with it. But law firms, let's say law firms, lawyers are inherently relatively overtly conservative when it comes to business practices. Lawyers are not business people. I went to school for finance. Most lawyers, they went to school for political science, public relations, something that isn't necessarily, business related. So it's really hard for them to kind of change and embrace new business practices. But man, I can tell you my firm is embracing this, I don't say wholeheartedly. We still see it as a tool, not a solution. But if lawyers aren't embracing it, there's a lot of ways that could impact things. One, defense firms. You see more and more carriers now going to defense firms and saying, what are you doing with AI? Why? Because guess what? If they aren't using AI, their billable hours, it's going to take them 3 times as much time to do something that they could with it. And that's hard I do a lot of these conferences, and you hear a lot of these law firms fighting against the carriers saying, this is ridiculous. Just because we have AI, we should be able to get a net benefit. And the carrier is just like, no, in the same ways, you don't have to go to the library anymore to look through the book. That's saving you time. You don't get to charge us for the time saved going, not going to the law library, not pulling out the book and reviewing the Dewey Decimal System. I don't know if I've said Dewey Decimal System for a long time.
Yeah, that's old school.
um, but in the end, this is like a technology. If it's not embraced, carriers are moving away from those defense firms. So if you are a lawyer and you handle a lot of hourly work, most of mine's contingent, but hourly work, you gotta do it, and you're gonna lose out, right? You're gonna have to bring in and generate more workflow, more business, because you're not able just to do busy work, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. So that's a big impact on lawyers and law firms, which is going to be really hard because there are still lawyers that are dictating. You remember what a dictation machine is, where they speak into the machine, then their assistant writes the letters. I can tell you, we have nobody left at our firm dictating, but there are a lot of them at the big firms you're working with where ask your lawyer the question, do you dictate? And man, it's tough if you dictate and now you have a hard time with email, but now you need to use AI. But it's a thing that we need to embrace. Subro vendors, same thing. If you're not ahead of this, your competitors are. The second look capacities and the secondary review of being able to look at closed claims, look at caseloads and find, opportunities that didn't exist. Most carriers are doing it, right? If you're not, there's a lot of money out there. I can tell you there's 100 different subro vendors who would love to, probably for free, review you, the carrier's cases. Get to me if you need some recommendations. But most of the big carriers are now implementing internal technologies where they have their own algorithms. They have their own AI. They have internal AI to be able to do that for them. Listen, I'm a mid-sized law firm. We have our own internal AI systems. I promise you most of these carriers are embracing it or are doing so. And it's fascinating to see where it goes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's, some of the vendors that I've talked to in the past, they're coming on board really quick. They're implementing AI in their technology to, scan vehicles, scan photos for, anything you can really think of, AI is getting integrated into it, quickly. So you really have to embrace it and get on board with it, especially like you said, with the TPAs. If they're not embracing it, they're taking more time on, the workload or the claims that you're giving them. You're going to want to go with the guy who's going to get it done faster. Because, what does that equate to when you're delayed on an estimate or on photos, from a TPA, at least from an auto perspective, or even property in that case, that time equates to, rental, living expenses, stuff on top of that you got to pay out. And then when you go to subrogate that, what are the chances you're going to get that back because vendors that you used was taking longer than they should have, as opposed to a vendors that, the adverse carrier is using and they say, no, look, this is what would have been done if we would have handled it. So, and that's a lot of the issues you see with ARB forums, people, other carriers looking at it and saying, you pay too much for that, and who are they going to side with when you provide a documentation showing this is what you paid in the past,
And embracing it is huge, right? But also understanding the risk factors. Even if you're like, I am never going to use AI. This is the devil. I'm not touching this technology, which is ridiculous, but people will have that mindset. You still need to know what these tools can do. Because I can tell you, think about like the risk factors. I have a client, it's a trucking company, broker. They came to me with a claim recently where, a load was tendered. And the load was tendered, and they have their whole confirmation process, which is really top end, is they get a photo of the truck from the trucking company showing, here I am with everything, the right truck's picking it up. We got the photo, they saw the name on the placard, and it was the right company. They saw the license plate, right truck. Problem is, legitimately, I looked at it, I'm like, this is perfect, but I gave an example. I'm like, this is AI created, right? They took a picture of it and they'd asked ChatGPT to create a new image with this trucking company on it and this license plate, an MC number and a DOT number and so forth. It's fake. You'll never know it is, right? There's no way to tell. But what I did is while I was on the call with the client, I said, hey, check this out. Keep talking. Within 30 seconds, what I did was I said, take this photo, transition it out to have MWO Law Trucking Company, input this MC number, and produce. And within 30 seconds, I produced it, sent it to my client, and he was amazed. And people don't understand what you can do. As a joke, I do a yearly golf trip, and I'm with all my buddies, and my wife is a saint to let me go on this golf trip with 4 kids. We're on this golf trip, and my friend he ended up kind of having a migraine. So he was back in the hotel room and we're all out, hanging out, having some cocktails after the golf round. And we thought it'd be funny to pretend like he's with us. So we just had AI, ChatGPT, put Steve into all of these photos. So for the whole evening, we're adding Steve to the photos. And no joke, he was there, right? For all intents and purposes, he was there. And it is so scary what you can do. I could with ChatGPT in a minute and a half, I can create a new video of a fake dash footage. Just say, hey, dash footage, I know it shows this vehicle at fault, but change the footage up so that we can make the other vehicle at fault. It will do it. So, I mean, it's really scary that we can't trust what we see anymore, but you need to understand we can't trust what we see anymore.
Yeah. Have you seen, it was fairly recent, they actually used AI in court to create a victim statement for a guy that had passed to show the suspect, that did the harm, did the murder, whatever it was, to show him and, for everybody in the courtroom, this guy apologizing to him, and giving, forgiving him for what he did. And it was so lifelike, you would think it was real until they told you, it was like, no, this was him. It was made in his likeness based on, photos. They uploaded all the photos and created this video. It was just insane.
It's scary. I mean, even like small use cases where just showing how, impactful it is. My kids love to have me tell them bedtime stories. They love it. And I am a lawyer. I am a great presenter. I am, good at what I do. I am not a creative, so like I can tell stories about when I was a kid. I can tell stories about things. I do daddy-daughter class with my daughter who's now 17, where for years I teach her economics and how inflation works. And we do courses at nighttime about, how the Fed interest rates and why we have, credit cycles and bubbles and busts. And I can do that. Really not that good at creating like fairy tale stories. I can go on ChatGPT and I literally, my kids sometimes at night, I'll have Delilah who's 2 and I'll be like, hey, talk into here and tell what you want a story. I'm like, I want a story about a monkey who plays the piano and likes to go to volleyball tournaments. Cool. And it'll tell a 5-minute bedtime story. Man, it's cool in that regard. Learning wise, I hear a lot of parents and you see all these, doom and gloom stories in the news about don't let your kids use AI. It's like, that's ridiculous. I mean, you could be a parent, right? Watch what your kids do. But the idea that AI is going to cause them to, go out and hurt themselves, that's wild. Like anything you need to see what your kids do. But yeah, my kids, I will be driving in the car and I'll be like, let's talk to chat. And they'll start asking questions about things and learn. And it's kind of wild. Rather than being on their iPad, they're asking questions about, why do rhinoceroses have horns? And, it'll tell a 2-minute story, right? This is crazy technology. That's amazing.
It is. Yeah. And my son's been doing the same thing. I noticed, because I consider myself a good parent. So I monitor his online activity fairly regularly. And, even today I saw his browser history for ChatGPT and what he was searching. And, it was the very innocent stuff. And it was just the one I found today was he was asking it, can I use this specific shoe shiner on glossy shoes?
Right.
And I'm like, that's perfect. Instead of Googling it, he's asking ChatGPT so he can get a faster answer. And so it's pretty awesome to see that as well, because we didn't have this growing up. We had some technology. It was completely different than what it is now. So these kids are, growing up with this AI, but you also, as a parent, you have to teach them there's certain restrictions, there's certain things you have to do. And, I teach my son how to write a better prompt. It's just, who I am, obviously from writing the book. I showed him that I wrote the book. He was amazed. And, he asked me what it was about and I explained it to him. And, I pulled out the most important information that I had out of it, which was how to write the prompts. I was like, you want to set your role. First, who are you? Who is the person writing this response? You set the format. Are you sending us in an email? Are you writing a paper? Are you just needing a paragraph? What it is, set those guidelines. The audience, who you're writing it to, the tone, very important. Do you want to be empathetic? Are you writing to an insured, stuff like that? And then the key content at the end is, what are the results that you want? What are you looking for? Set those guidelines, and then your results are going to be so much better than you just ask it, how do I shine my shoes? Obviously, in this example, he didn't use the full prompt that I provided to him. He's still learning. But he did ask specifically, how do I do this? This is the product I'm using. Does it work on glossy shoes? So he put a lot of detail into it, and the result he got, it was perfect. Yeah, it's just amazing. We'll see where it's going. I know a lot of schools are kind of outlawing it. They're banning it. They're saying no use of AI, doing proctored tests when they're online, so they can't use AI. They can't use their phones. It's incredible to see the way technology is advancing with AI in schools.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone to play around with it, use it, because it's great for your career, great for your personal life. I can tell you that I do a lot of client dinners. I just ask AI. It gives here's the problem, nice restaurant, high end, but not overly stuffy, looking for good, trendy food, this or that, craft cocktails. It'll just tell me the restaurant. I mean, it's wild. But on a higher level, and I will say this, preface this as an attorney, do not take this as legal or medical advice. But I have a close friend who's a doctor. He's my doctor. I have, a lot of friends in the medical profession. And I am incredibly skeptical. I am a firm believer in Western medicine. I will tell you that. And, I am vaccinated on, most of the basic things. But I will say that I just have a healthy skepticism of the medical industry now, especially from the fact that you can't get doctor's appointments. You just have to go to urgent care, or then you call the urgent care and they tell you to go to the emergency room. I've had a lot of medical issues for myself, my children, different people missed by doctors, all the time. Minor or big things, for example, whatever it could be. I won't give examples on medical issues, but, right now you can I'll put symptoms into ChatGPT, and it will give me, I've had several scenarios where the doctor got it wrong. And then I came back and I said, hey, I know this is crazy, but I put this into ChatGPT and this all lines up. What do you think? And guess what? I was right. And it's happened several times. And it's scary that, the doctors need to be embracing it. How are they not? Right? It's the technology's there. So just keep that in mind. Don't trust AI instead of a doctor. Go to the doctor. But, obviously we need to, even in the medical space, we need to advocate for ourselves. And it's a great way to help you advocate, help you to go into a meeting, be with a doctor, with a lawyer, with your accountant, with more background information to make things more productive. So I think that's huge. One thing I did want to ask you is kind of specific action items. And we talked about a lot of it, but what specific action items do you have for insurance carriers? What can they start doing tomorrow to embrace this technology to be more efficient and effective around the board?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is obviously ensuring you have the budget, creating a role or creating an assignment, an extension of a role for somebody who is familiar with AI, with IT, with tech, and also passionate about it. Like I said, there has to be that human touch. You want someone who's going to go in, they're going to look at the technology and really kind of see what they can do to build out, question them to see if they can build out, workflows and processes to make, whatever portion of your claims system, your claims team more efficient, and I've done that in the past where I've looked at certain things that I say, okay, this is a really slow process. How can we implement AI to make this faster? And I went through a whole process. I created out a whole AI program, sent it out to IT so that they could start working on that and, creating those efficiencies for the whole company, reducing expenses, stuff like that. So you really have to have that role with someone who's passionate about it and also who is going to, audit the results, going to make sure it's accurate, and then just kind of implement it. Implementation is a big part of it too. When you implement any kind of new AI processes to the team, you have to get them on board too, right? So you got to make sure you don't have those guys who are scared of it. You have to explain it, what it is, and get everybody on board. And then also explain how is this going to affect their job? How is it going to make them more efficient? And also, be empathetic. Explain to them, hey, look, we're not taking your job away. We're just going to make you more efficient so you can focus on more important things.
Absolutely. That's the case. Now, how about the individual adjuster? What should that adjuster, what should that claim specialist, be it that, that attorney, what should they be doing today to embrace this technology or to make sure that they are as effective as possible and doing what they can for their own future?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, sign up for, the free trial, sign up for the free version of ChatGPT, just start playing around with it. Obviously, check out my book.
I agree.
You know,
I read it, by the way, and it's excellent. So when we'll give a bigger plug at the end on where people can buy it.
and yeah, I appreciate that. But that's the biggest thing is just get your hands, dirty, get in there, start playing around with it, understanding it and seeing what the capabilities are to really utilize that. And then once you understand what it is and how it can help you or how it can hurt you, and you'll understand the risks. You'll know how you can apply that to your current role to make yourself more efficient. Write those better emails, faster emails. How many times have you sent out an email and for whatever reason, spell check didn't go through. So when you get a response back, you see your email in the chain, you're like, oh my gosh, like, why did I send that? How did that not, how did, Outlook not catch that? So stuff like that, you're, generating those more professional emails, but you can also, fine tune, when you're working with ChatGPT of putting it more in your tone. So it can be a little more casual. It can sound a little more like you. So it's not robotic. I mean, how many times have you read an email from somebody and you knew, and I've known this, somebody used ChatGPT or, whatever, Claude, Gemini, whatever. And this is the first response they got. They used a bad prompt. This is a generic response. They copied and pasted it into the email. When I read that, you can tell once you start understanding AI and just some of the responses you get on bad prompts. And that's also mentioned in the book. You'll start seeing the difference between the two. You can start writing better emails, better letters, anything is that, like I said, the possibilities are endless when you start using it.
And yeah, read it. I think that's important because you're correct. Read it, edit it. Just because you put something and it's generated doesn't mean that it's accurate. We've had, all of these crazy citations. There's been a lot of lawyers that have been, really sanctioned hard for, citing cases that don't actually exist. So understand, it's a tool, right? Just like all of this. AI is a tool. It's not a solution. It's something that you should add to your repertoire. But also remember that, just because it's there doesn't mean it's accurate. Look to see where the citation is. It's getting better. I mean, the best part is I'd encourage you, search some stuff, subrogation. 90% of the citations are going to come from my website, which is hilarious because we have all these, resources, charts and stuff. I swear to God, at least, let's say I said 90, maybe 3/4 of everything that I search on truly Subro specific topics is, mwl-law.com. I'm like, I know it's accurate. Perfect. I made this. But yeah, just make sure that you're citing it. Another big issue, and you hear a lot of people that are not necessarily all that well-versed in AI mention is, oh, this is plagiarism. This is plagiarism. You can't just put it in and send it as your own. What's your response to that?
There's certain ways you can avoid that. If you want to make sure, obviously you don't want to copy somebody else. You don't know exactly where the sources are that chat's pulling from. So one of the things I do, if I'm writing something, especially if it's going to be a professional email, anything like that, I'm going to double check it. I'm going to verify it. I'm going to copy and paste that into Google. I'm going to check it, see if anything pops out. I'm going to ask ChatGPT, and I'm going to also set those guidelines that when writing this email, I want to ensure nothing is copied from any outside sources. This needs to be summarized and paraphrased in my own words, to avoid any copyright, infringement. And, that's really what you need to do, what you should do.
Absolutely. So there's a lot to it, but I mean, man, this is fascinating stuff. I'm excited to see where things go. I mean, it's like if we looked back 4 years ago, even 3 years ago, and said like 2 years ago, will we be at this point today? I mean, I think people would say that's crazy. There's no chance. In the same way as if you asked 10 years ago, will we have self-driving cars on the road? People would say, no way I'd trust it. But now, I just rode in a Waymo recently with no driver. It's crazy where we're going, but people need to learn to if they won't embrace it, at least understand it. I think that's a big factor.
Yeah. And that's my biggest takeaway is, try to embrace it. If you can't, like you said, learn about it, understand it, just have that knowledge of what it is so you can be on board. If your company starts pushing for, moving to AI, have that conversation with them up front. Just let them know, hey, I don't understand this. So you can get more, at least more knowledge on the subjects and, get in line with it. Because that's another thing I see is, if you have these adjusters and they're just against it 100%, they're old school, they don't want to do it. Those are the ones that are really going to get left behind. You have to embrace it. You have to get on board. So.
Absolutely. Now, I appreciate your time today, Donnie. Give us your plug. Where can we find your book? Where can people purchase it? Remind us of the name again. Give us all the details.
Yep. So it is on Amazon.com. It is self-published. The title is The AI Advantage in Claims by Donnie Vaughn. And usually if you search the AI Advantage in Claims, Donnie Vaughn, it'll pop up pretty quickly. For some reason, there's a lot of Donnie Vaughns out there who have published books, so those weren't mine. But,
Perfect. And then if anyone has questions, of course, email me, email Donnie, reach out to us. I am here. I'm happy to send you a link if you need to, but I would encourage everyone to check out the book. It's really good. It's a good investment. I strongly encourage you to take a look. But Donnie, I think that's all the questions I have for you. Anything else you want to add or where are we?
No, that's it. I appreciate everything.
Beautiful. This is Ashton Kirsch signing off from this episode of the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Until next time.